Continuing on this little series we've got as we kind of figure out how can we have a second chance in life, and sometimes I think we've all ran across this issue in life where we ask this question: where did it all go wrong? I mean, how did it ever get to the point that it is now? I mean, where did things the wheels just kind of come off, or where did we ever get off track? Primarily, it's always asking the same thing, isn't it? And so I want to share with you a letter that I ran across a number of years ago that a young lady wrote to the Dallas Morning News. Her name is Marcy Musgrove. She was a junior at the time. Now, you got to remember, this is back in 1999 at Texas A&M. And I want you to just listen to her words. It says, "I'm a member of the upcoming generation, the one after Generation X, that has yet to be given a name. So far, it appears that most people are rallying behind the idea of calling us Generation Next. Now, I believe I know why. The older generation is hoping we will mindlessly assume our place is next in line. That way, they won't have to explain why my generation has to experience so much pain and heartache." What heartache, you say? Don't you know you have grown up in a time of great prosperity? Yeah, we know that, but believe me, it has been drilled into our heads since birth. Unfortunately, the pain and hurt I speak of cannot be reconciled with money. You have tried for years to buy us happiness, but it's only temporary. Money isn't the answer, and it is time for people to begin admitting their guilt for failing my generation. Now, I will admit that I wasn't planning to write this. I was going to tuck it away in some corner of my mind and fall victim to your whole next mentality. But after the massacre in Littleton, Colorado, I realized that as a member of this generation that kills without remorse, I have a duty to challenge all my elders to explain why they have allowed things to become so bad. Let me tell you this. These questions don't represent only me, but a whole generation that is struggling to grow up and make sense of this world. We all have questions, and we all want explanations. People may label us Generation Next, but we are more appropriately Generation Y. Why did you lie to us? Why did you lie when you made the vows till death do you part? Why do you fool yourselves into believing that divorce is really better for the kids in the long run? Why do so many of you divorced parents spend more time with your new boyfriend or girlfriend than you do with your own children? Why do you ever fall victim to the notion that kids are just as well off being raised by a complete stranger at a daycare center than they are by their own mother or father? Why do you look down on parents who decide to quit work and stay home and raise their children? Why does the television do most of the talking at family meals? Why is work more important than your own family? Why is money regarded as more important than relationships? Why is quality time generally no more than a 5 or 10 minute conversation each day? Why do you try to make up for the lack of time you spend with us by giving us more and more material objects that we really don't need? Why does work in the form of a cell phone, laptop, computer, etc., always come with us on vacations? Why have you neglected to teach us values and morals? Why haven't you lived moral lives that we could model after our own after? Why isn't religion one of the most important words in our household? Why do you play God when it comes to abortion? Why don't you have enough faith in us to teach us abstinence rather than safe sex? Why don't you allow us to watch? Why do you allow us to watch violent movies but expect us to maintain some type of childhood innocence? Why do you allow us to spend unlimited time on the internet but still are shocked by our knowledge of how to build bombs? Why are you so afraid to tell us no sometimes? Why is it hard for you to realize school shootings and other violent juvenile behavior result from a lack of your attention more than anything else? Call us Generation Next if you want to, but I think you will be surprised as to how we will fail to fit into your neat little category. These questions should and will be asked of the generations that have failed us. You have pursued your selfish desires for years, but now it's time to reap what you have sown. Some rude awakening like the Littleton massacre have occurred and will probably continue until you begin to answer our questions and make the drastic changes that puts us, your kids, first. Time is running out. For just in a few short years, we will be grown and it will be too late. You might not think we are worth it, but I guarantee that Littleton will look like a drop in the bucket compared to what might occur when a neglected generation Y comes to power. Wow. Now, you consider that, the reason I reflect back to 1999 and what took place, all the things that have taken place in the last 15 years. Where did it all go wrong? This is a person from that generation saying. And this is what's happened in our life, isn't it? Sometimes we say, well, the kids today, they just don't get it. The kids today, they just have a problem. The kids today, it's all their fault. If I was raised like that, my mama would have slapped the taste out of my mouth. And you may be why is because those are our kids. A number of years ago when I was in college and I was getting ready, my junior year, I did an internship in my home congregation. We did it. It was for 12 weeks long during the summer. And one of the things they wanted me to do is work with the younger people. And as I sat down with the elders, and they talked about the things that they would want outlined for me to do and to cover over that time, number one on the list was to talk to them about the way they dressed and came to church and the way they carried themselves. They said, have you seen the way the girls are dressing today? The shorts are up to here, the tops are down to there. And, and said, we've got to do something about it. We'd like you to talk to them about it. I said, well, here's the problem I have with all that. I don't have a problem mentioning about how to live a life that would be, God-honoring and present ourselves in a way that would seem to be that we would be modest in the way we live, leave a little something to the imagination. But the problem we run into is a lot of these girls are getting the clothes out of their mama's closet. The boys that are wearing their pants down here, maybe their dads are the ones that's buying for them, or they're wearing their clothes that way. So when I tell the kids they shouldn't be doing that, and it's modeled differently in the home, what am I supposed to do? See, these are the kind of things we have to deal with. Oftentimes we want to pass off what's wrong onto someone else. We don't want to take responsibility for it. Eli had two good examples in the form of sons of how things can go wrong. Read with me from 2 Samuel chapter 2 this morning. Eli's sons, first of all, we have to understand, were wicked men. Now, let's read with this passage of Scripture and just hear what's happening in their life. In verses 12 through 17, it says this, Eli's sons were wicked men. They had no regard for the Lord. Now, it was the practice of the priests with the people that whenever anyone offered a sacrifice, and while the meat was being boiled, the servant of the priest would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand. And he would plunge it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself whatever the fork brought up. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the servant of the priest would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. If the man said to him, let the fat be burned up first, and then take whatever you want, the servant would then answer, no, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force. This sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they treated the Lord's offering with contempt. Now, the entire problem is summed up right here in this passage. They did not know the Lord. Now, we might think about that. Think about it just for a couple of minutes. Eli was the priest at Shiloh, and as were his sons. You got to remember, here's who we're talking about, Hophni and Phinehas. And if anyone in all the land of all of Israel should be righteous, you would think it would be these men. If anyone was going to know the Lord, it should be the priest. How can we help other people know God if we don't know them? Have you ever been in contact with somebody and you know somebody and you mention somebody says, oh yeah, I know them. Well, maybe they know about that person, but they don't really know the person. You ever done that? You said, look, you know Bob, he works over there at the tire center. Bob, you go talk to Bob, you need some tires. Oh yeah, I know Bob. Well, you don't really know Bob. You just know Bob works at the tire center. And yet we like to get puffed up in our knowledge thinking we know someone. number of years ago, my father-in-law had a friend who was in the military with him. Well, when they both retired later on, his friend ended up building and opening up a Jiffy Lube in Jacksonville. So my father-in-law was the type of man, he felt like if he knew somebody that you need to go see them and they were going to give you this astronomical, phenomenal deal. You know, I mean, they were almost like give you money to come and buy from them or to, let them do whatever it is they were going to do for you. We realize that's not really the case, but for whatever reason, our own ego and our own mind, we feel like that we've got something or we can get something from someone like that. They just owe it to us for some reason. So I go and see this man just to get an oil change on my car. When I got done, he had sold me some filters and things for my car. My car didn't even carry. Just didn't service on that vehicle. And I found out when I went back as I was double checking where I worked at, I said, let me look those parts up. Obviously, this is not serviceable on this particular make and vehicle. Didn't even have them, but yet I'd paid him for things and service and labor for things that weren't done. You see, sometimes we get to thinking that it's just okay to live life that way. Well, here we go. We find out with these two priests that they're leaders of the people in most all areas of in life, from matters of health and matters of law. They settle disputes and everything else. And they're important people in Shiloh, and yet they don't know the Lord. The very thing that they should be doing, the very people you should be able to go to for answers, these are the ones who seem to be the furthest away from God. Now, the truth is, there's no guarantee that anyone will have a relationship with the Lord. I preach, and Dale can tell you and attest of all the years he's preached and ministered to and talked to people in private conversations about a relationship with God. The choice is ultimately going to be up to the individual in which you share God with. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility to at least share and demonstrate how God is working in our life. Now, being in the right family, you remember these people were Aaron's descendants. They were the Levites. They had the right job. They were priests, or living in the right place. They're living right at the temple. I mean, they're right there in the middle of everything. Here's what's happening. Eli's sons should have been 100% true blue, but unfortunately they weren't. Each of us needs a relationship with the Lord. It's the most important thing in all the world. If you don't have it today, I want to challenge you to get to know God. As a matter of fact, Jesus would say in Matthew 16, verse 26, what good is it for a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? And what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Now, how many things do we put more time and emphasis on than the Lord? I mean, how much time do you spend with God? Well, let's say 3 hours on Sunday. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're going to come to Sunday school and church, morning and evening. And we got an hour on Wednesday. We come together, so we give him 4 hours a week. That's the time the church designates that we would give God. But how do we take it any further than that? How about personal time? How about praying and reading Scripture? Taking some time just to talk to someone else about the Lord. One thing that I do is I talk about my son, Trey. Trey's going to be 15, come Tuesday. It's hard to believe. My daughter, I've got a granddaughter. I talk about those people. I talk about my wife. My wife is back there working with the kids today, and I want to let her know that I mentioned her in my sermon. But regardless, we talk about those individuals that we love and care about, don't we? They're just a part of our life. And so how can we not, if we really love and we really care about God, how can we not talk about Him? And now, it doesn't mean that everybody you're going to know and everybody you're going to talk to is going to want to talk about God. But look, they'll listen to you about your grandchildren and your children and your spouses. They'll listen when you mention about God. It's not like you're harping on them about why they don't know them. It's about like I said, do you know Jesus? Well, look, let me tell you, since I've learned, Jesus and I were having a conversation the other day. When I talk to him about so-and-so, it just seems like things begin to clear up in my life. You're not telling them what they got to do. You're just talking about God and His personal relationship with you in your life. So we have to stop and think. How much time do we spend with God? Let's ask this question. How much time do we spend on hobbies? How much time do we spend on, well, if it's like we play in some sports, or we're an outdoorsman, we're fishermen or hunters, or we like to cross stitch, you know? How much time do we spend with that? We can always look at our time and money as we answer that question, can't we? A youth minister once told me, a girl told him in his youth group, she says, I sure hope there's a volleyball net in heaven, because I spend a lot more time practicing volleyball than I do at church. But she loved volleyball. At least she's honest. Maybe she's more honest than some of us are when we get to talking about our relationship with God. You know, have you ever said that? I sure hope there's hunting in heaven. Well, I sure hope there's baseball in heaven. Well, I sure hope there's, and you can fill in the blank, whatever your, I sure hope there is. You've said it at some point in time in your life, haven't you? The problem is no matter how much we like these things, just like Hophni and Phinehas says, you know, you can not know God, and because we can get so tied up with them. These men were just greedy and immoral men, the Bible says. They profaned the sacrifices by demanding their portion even before God got his. In other words, I'm more important than God. I don't want the part after the fat's been burned up. I want raw meat. I want the choice meat. I want whatever it is that I want, and then we'll give God the rest of it. Do you ever do that? Have you ever chosen to get what you want and what you desire first, and then if there's any left over, we'll give it to God? Again, examine your time and money, and you'll determine whether you've made them choices. You see, greed and immorality are problems that not only were in that day, but we're facing them today. The second thing we do need to understand about these men is that Eli did confront them. I mean, he did. In chapter 2, verses 22 through 25, we read this in 1 Samuel. Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all of Israel, and how they had slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Not only were they taking the sacrifices that belonged to God, but they slept with the women at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them, why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these things, these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, it is not a good report that I hear spreading among the Lord's people. If a man sins against another man, God may mediate for him, but if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him? His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. So he did warn them about what's taking place and what he had seen, and he even told them, said, what you're doing is bad. Have you ever done that with your kids? Excuse me, your kids? You need to stop doing that. That's just bad. You don't need to do it. And then you see them, you know, they're climbing across something, or they're doing something that you know they're not supposed to do. And say, well, we'll just let them fall. Sooner or later, they'll figure it out that it's not a good thing to do. You see, Eli had heard about the sins that they were committing, and we only know about the sacrifices and the immorality. They're taking the sacrifice that belongs to the Lord. They're even sleeping with the women who were ministering and serving at the entrance of the tent of meeting. But what I want you to understand is there was probably a lot more going on. There was a lot more sin taking place. I mean, it's like quicksand. It draws you in, and as you get there, it just gets deeper and deeper, doesn't it? And so there was a lot more happening. And Eli's rebuke, though, is not very harsh. He just talks to them. And when you sin against man, God's going to intercede for you. I mean, he said he can. In God's law, there's a provision of forgiveness and restitution when we sin against one another. And you can do certain things maybe for a while and escape and avoid the penalty, but sooner or later, the consequences are going to come up. And this time they had cities of refuge. If you sinned or did something wrong, you could go there and you could have refuge. You see, you were seeking forgiveness through the sacrifice you made. And so in these days, there was no one to intercede, with God. Jesus hasn't come yet. He's the one who intercedes for us when we sin. But at that time, there is no one. And in the end, these boys paid no attention to their father. Well, God's already decided what he's going to do to them. He's going to put them to death. That's what the Bible says. And you say, well, see right there, Dan, it don't really matter if he said anything else because God's going to kill them. But what's happening is God's not making them disobedient. He just already knows the choices that they're going to make. That's the God I serve. I mean, I'm glad I serve a God that I can't fool. You know, a lot of times we can fool the people around us. I fool Carolyn, or I might could fool Deb, but I'm not going to fool God. And you know, you can say, boy, I sure do like that preacher. He do. But God says, oh, wait a minute, I need to talk to you a minute about something. You remember I said, once in a while he just tells me, come over here and let me hit you in the back of the head. That's why I used to tell people to do something wrong. What's wrong with you? You knock some sense in them. And sometimes God does that to me. He said, come here and let me hit you in the back of the head. You're not fooling nobody. And the problem is that's all Eli said. He didn't go along with their choices. You know, he just didn't agree with what was happening. He didn't think it was right. Now, let's give him credit. The Bible said he's an old man. Maybe he's just tired. He's worn out. He just couldn't do but so much. Or, you know, these are grown after all. But there's no indication Eli ever said another thing to the boys about their action. This is what we've got. This is what we have recorded for us. But what he did do is he failed to stop the sinful lifestyle of his children. Now, maybe you want to object with me. I mean, you say, whoa, these are grown men. They're making their own choices. You don't understand. They're grown. How could he have stopped them? Let me tell you this. Eli was the priest at Shiloh. He could have forbade those boys from even having any part of the ministry at the tent of meeting. He could have refused to allow them to have anything to do with the sacrifices that were being offered. And, you know, that they were profaning, the Bible says. He could have kept them from the tent altogether and away from the women that they were sleeping with. He could have gotten rid of the women. That's the power the man had. But he chose just to simply say, stop doing that. You don't need to do that. That's basically what he gave them. You see, he could have stopped the shame that they were bringing to God. Not that he could have changed their heart and their life, but he could have took them away from where they were drawing this negative attention to the Lord and diminishing who he was. And so what we really find out here in chapter 3, verses 11 through 14, we're fixing to read, is what happened is Eli did not restrain them. Read with me, verses 11 through 14 from 1 Samuel 3. And the Lord said to Samuel, see, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone here tingle. Ooh, don't we love that? I got something to tell you. Something's fixing to happen. Ooh, tell me what's going to happen. What's going to happen? I can't wait to hear this. You need to tell me about this. He says, it's going to make everybody's ears tingle. We love that. We're all in on tell me the ear-tingling stories. What's going to happen? And here's what he says. At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I have told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin, listen, he knew about. His sons made themselves contemptible, and he failed to restrain them. That means if he failed to restrain them, that means what? He had the ability to restrain them. If he failed to restrain them, that means God had given him the power to be able to do so. Therefore, I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house would never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Samuel lay down until morning, and then he opened the door of the house of the Lord, and he was afraid to tell Eli the vision. What could Eli have done? I mean, think about it. The real question is, maybe for you today, what could you do? I mean, if you've got a child that's straying, or you got someone in your life that's close to you that you know that is sinning against God, not just against man, what can you do? I mean, what can you do if as a parent, they're sure that your child's going to be a Christian? Can I tell you this? Nothing. You can't make them make a decision. All you can do is put all your heart and energy into living the life that says that I live a life that I believe in a true God who is all-powerful, who knows everything, can do anything I ask him to do, and he has all authority over everything. That's the God I serve. And so as a result of that, I cannot guarantee my children will follow him, but one thing I can do, I can guarantee they won't by the way I choose to live or not restrain or do anything for them. And sometimes I think there are some things that we need to be doing to lead our kids down the right path. Number one, I think the single greatest thing we can do is pray for anyone who is away from God or we know they're tied up in some sin. We can't watch the people every minute of every day, but what we can do, we can entrust them to God's care. We can pray for those individuals that if they're struggling with something in life to make right decisions, that God would put up some barriers in their life that would protect them from certain things and situations and people that they may be coming in contact with. We can be praying that they would choose to do things that would honor God. You see, there's different rules for different people. Now, I have 2 children. I've got one that's grown. I got another one that's almost grown. I've got a daughter that's 23 years old. If I were to tell her you need to be home and in bed by 11 o'clock, that rule's not really going to make a big difference to her, is it? Unless she's in my house. And we say, we're going to lock the door. You're either here or you're going to sleep in the car. I mean, we could do that, but that probably wouldn't make a big difference. Trey, he's got a 10 o'clock bedtime normally so he can get enough rest and stuff like that. He's old enough, he can handle that. Sometimes he goes beyond, and I have to tell you, sometimes we have to get him to go to bed. You know why? Not because he's sitting there watching TV, because he's reading his Bible, he's journaling, and he's praying. And says, son, it's time to go to bed. You got to go to bed. I know you want to be with the Lord, but you got to go to bed. And don't you know, as a parent, it makes mom and dad feel guilty when we have to tell our son, you just need to quit reading the Bible. Huh? I mean, we wrestle with that. How, where do you stop? I mean, why is it okay to say that? But at the same time, you said, you just got to say, Lord, I love you. I'll see you in the morning. We'll get on with it again tomorrow. Those types of things, we put guidelines in our life. But if there was sin in his life, don't you think I'd be all over him, crawling him every minute? Where are you at? Why aren't you doing this? You're not going to this place. You're not going to allow that person to be in your life. I mean, I've got to do something. And if I'm not restraining them. But what I do is I do pray for my kids. We need to be consistent in the way we're doing and treating and punishing even if we're talking about kids. We need to know if they go outside the fence, if there's going to be consequences to be paid. Growing up, my grandmother had, like many towns, she lived in Kinston, and they originally started out, they had these little boxwood hedges or whatever, how those things just grow and grow and grow, and they end up, and there was like this little fence. You remember the old fence? You used to put the little metal thing in the ground, you still get them, then you hung like this little 4x4 or 4x6 mesh type wire down, and that was what the fences were between the yards, And then over the years, the people had these big hedges, and they just grew to 5, 6, 8 feet tall, or how they were, and you'd have to go out there and cut the hedges, and that became the barrier between the houses and the driveways, and that separated those were your borders. And I remember my grandmother, there was one place where in the hedge that went up to the back, we could go, what I couldn't understand, we could go to Mr. Edwards' house on one side, and we could go to the Lamb's house on the other side, but we couldn't go through the hedges in the backyard to the neighbor that lived back there. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, never really spanked us, but she would give a good tongue lashing. But one time I decided to cut through and go around to circle the block to go to where the little store was. I was going to take the scenic route, and she saw me go through the back hedge. And when I got back, my grandma got a switch and hit me with it off one of them hedge bushes. And I didn't think there'd been no big issue because I'd cut through the hedges on either side. What it was she knew the type of people, and the influence could have been on that side, and she didn't want us to be involved with that kind of thing, going out the back. You see, she restrained me from doing it again. Them switches hurt. But if prayer is the most important thing, then setting a good example will be the second, don't you think? Have you ever told somebody, look, I know I'm probably not the best one to be telling you this, but here's what I would do. Don't do as I what? Do as I say. I mean, what do they see you doing? What do people in your life see you doing? If you expect people to come to church, don't you think it would be good if you came to church? You talk to somebody, say, well, I know I don't go to church that often, but maybe you don't try going to church. That might help you with what you're going through. I mean, that would help you really rethink. You can't tell them. I mean, if we want our kids to come to church, what do we got? Where do we need to be? Church. Thank you. If we want people in our lives to be immersed into Christ and accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, then we ought to be living the Christian life. They ought to be seeing those things demonstrated in our life. I think one of the most heartbreaking experiences I ever had in my life in being married is as I was learning to become a Christian. And I was seeking the Lord, and I hadn't made a choice to be immersed on my own. It was chosen for me as a child. And I was wrestling. It was a months-long process in my decision. And one evening, Kelsey was a little girl, and it was a Wednesday, and it's just been a bad day, I guess, at home. Kelsey hadn't been in the best mood or whatever, and Amy decided the weather was kind of cold and everything else. And Amy said, she said, I don't think tonight we're going to go to church. She said, why don't if you want to go, you can go. Me and Kelsey will just stay here. And I said, well, okay. And I talked to her about wanting to be baptized, probably was going to be doing something. She said, are you going to be baptized tonight? I said, no, I don't think tonight's going to be it. I just don't. And and in reality, that's not what I had chosen to do that night. When I left home, I had no intent of making the decision to tonight's the night. But when I stepped on the stoop of the church, when I walked up that little flight of steps to get up there to enter the church building, the minister, James Warren, was standing at the door, and he said, how you doing, buddy? I said, yeah, I'm still praying. He said, you made a decision yet? I said, I think tonight's tonight. He said, do what? I said, I think I'm ready. Tonight's tonight. I think I won't do it tonight. He said, that baptistry's cold now. I ain't had it on. Said, it takes a while to heat up. He said, it'd be cold. I don't mind. I said, if you don't mind, I don't mind. And I think the Lord's got a good sense of humor. Because for 9 years, the last church I was at, that baptistry didn't have no heater in it. And it was the one everybody has to get in. It weren't like, well, you'll be all right. You sit down and I'll just get my arm right. Ooh, that's some cold water, and dry it off with a towel. But he reminded me every time I baptized somebody of that night and the decision I made. Now, I tell you, that's a wonderful experience in my life. I was excited about the decision I made. And I came home, and Amy's like, what happened? She said, you like something? I said, I got baptized tonight. She said, you did what? I said, yeah, I got baptized tonight. I chose to be baptized. I said, she said, well, why did you do it tonight? You should have told me. We would have went to church with you. That's something your daughter needs to be able to see. She wants to be able to see her daddy, be able to, make this kind of decision. What's going to happen now if she never chooses to do this because you decided you wanted to be selfish tonight and do it when nobody else could be here? Now, look, I'm not throwing off on her. I'm not throwing off on you, honey. I know you're back there watching. This is the principle in which we need to be getting right here. If we want this in other people's lives, don't we need to be demonstrating it out public where other people can see it? That's the reason I say I never invite somebody to be a closet Christian. I'm never going to ask you to every head bowed and every eye closed. And now maybe there's people who made some genuine decisions that way. I'm not saying they haven't. But what I really told you is okay is I'm giving an invitation. I'm the only one looking around. You slip your hand up. I tell you, put your hand down. You've done it. And you don't never have to tell anybody you and Jesus even got a thing going. Ain't it what happens when we do that? And I can go out of here saying, I've accepted Jesus. And then somebody later on says, well, how do you a Christian? Well, yeah, I did it at church 6-8 months ago. You did? Well, I didn't know about it. Yeah, I just had to, I raised my hand, preacher said. Look, if I can't do it amongst a group of people who are here and that should be loving me and should be living the life that I want to be living, then I can't do it out there. And with Eli's situation, what happened is sin was taking place in his family. He did not restrain them. And so we got to make some decisions. And no one knows your best but you. Sometimes Eli may have said, well, you know what? I did talk to my sons. I tried to help them. I told them where they were wrong. But he didn't do everything, did he? And sometimes my best, I may say, well, I tried. I really did. I did the best I could. I might have did in the 10 minutes I knew about what I tried to work on it. But if I've known for it for 2 weeks and I tried to fix something in 2 minutes, I haven't done my best, have I? How about you living your life for Jesus? It's one thing to show up for church on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock and give him an hour and say, well, I did the best I could this morning. Or are you living a life that's going to be where he knows you've done your best all the time? Are you demonstrating restraint in your own personal life? Well, you know there's a sin there that you said, I need to restrain myself. I need to get out from under what I'm dealing with. I need to get to the point in my life where when people look at me and they say, you know what, God is really doing something in my life. That's where we are.